Hi, I'm Linda, and I am a member of the Potters Guild, and we are lucky enough to be in the Tet Center. And I spend a lot of time there. I have done a lot of arts and crafts in my life. I used to teach folk, and now I'm doing pottery. So I thought I would share uh, a, a simple beginner class in clay, just for people who want to have an introduction, to want to try clay. Um, you don't need a lot of tools. Of course, you can go crazy with tools just like everything else, and some of the tools make the job easier. It's like having a sharp knife and cutting a tomato. It makes the job easier. But for today, I'm going to try and use things that you have in your home, and we're going to do just a simple little project, and it's just for you to get your hands dirty. I do get all my supplies, Stoneware, and they are a fantastic resource, and we are so lucky to have them in Kingston. They are on Development Drive. So if you do want to get into pottery, that's a great place for supplies. It's hard because clay comes in 25 to 50-pound boxes, and to get that shipped, it's quite expensive. So we are so fortunate to have Amaranth in Kingston. So if you want to visit their shop, they'll give you all sorts of tips and ideas, and you might be inspired and you might not, but it's a great resource for us, and we're so lucky to have them. So I am going to start by doing a couple of we're going to do a little ring holder, key holder. You can do different design. You can customize them. You can do them in any color. And if you didn't want a little bowl, you could do a little ornament. This has a hole in it. This one, just a little flat. You can make little ornaments for the trees. I've got a Christmas tree here. So a clay is so versatile. Here's a little ornament that you can do. And if you paint, you can paint on them. You can put somebody's name on a Christmas tree ornament, or you can do them in different colors. I just chose those colors because it's spring and summer, and I wanted them spring and summery. But I thought it was a good and easy project for you to start with. Let's go over the things that you'll need. So there are two types of clay, and at the Kingston Potters Guild, we use Stoneware clay. We have to put it in the kiln, so it has to be bisqued. So you create your item, and then you have to put it in the kiln, and you have to heat it up so that the clay is vitrified. So here is some Stoneware that's vitrified, and it's bisqued, so it's quite strong, solid. And it's before this handle would have broken off if I had held it up after I'd made it. So after you do this, then I'm going to cover it in glaze, which is basically, in my mind, liquid glass. Then you put it in the kiln again to melt this glaze to create this finish, what we're all used to seeing with pottery. So this to me is food safe. This to me is, I can make mugs, I can make casserole dishes. Air dry clay, which is something that you might want to start with, and that's what this class is using. Air dry clay, it just dries in the kiln. You don't need to heat it up. You don't need to do anything with it. It just dries. And then you can cover it with a varnish. And I used Mod Podge, and this is dishwasher safe. So I'm assuming it's quite versatile and quite strong. But there are all sorts of Mod Podge out there, lots of varnishes. So if you were interested in air dry clay, you could go to Michael's, or you could find out what you want to cover and finish your piece with, to give it that nice shine and to give it that stability so that it will last when you're throwing your coins on it or rings on it, or for the different projects that you're using. This was also done with air dry clay, these little fellas. Hopefully they are clear for you. Here's a little piggy. But, you know, sky's the limit. Little bird, I'm going to put a couple little feet on it. Sky's the limit. There are so many different things that you can do with clay, whether it's air dry or whether it's stoneware. And it's just fun to use. So the air dry clay comes and the stoneware clay comes in 50-pound boxes. And I think Amaranth might even sell you one bag of 25-pound clay, half a box, if you go in, which is great. Then you're not committed to 50 pounds, but I'm not sure. But let's get started. So I'm going to move this clay out of the way. So there's the 25-pound bag of clay. So I've cut this piece of clay off of that big rectangle, and I used what's called a cutting wire. This is a cutting wire. Instead of going and buying a cutting wire, you can use fishing line. Just grab some fishing line out of your husband's fishing tackle box. Don't tell him I told you that. And this is the best way to cut this clay, because with a knife on that big chunk of clay, it's a little bit more awkward. With this, it's wonderful. You just slice it through like that, so, and you've got your clay. So I find that that's the best way to cut the clay. And then we always cover the clay up so that it doesn't dry out. And you've got your chunk of clay, so you're all set to go. So normally we want to just knead our clay a little bit. So you just want to kind of gently knead it without getting air bubbles in it. And there are several different techniques to do this, but let's just put it into a nice little ball. Let's just make it simple. So we're going to pat it down, and I also use a roller because we want to flatten this. And somebody taught me how to roll, which was brilliant. They said, just roll it a little bit in the middle, turn it, and then roll it just in the middle again, and turn it, roll it in the middle. And it seems like such a simple task, but I found rolling very hard to get it all even until I learned this technique. Thank you, Chandler Swain. One of the workshops that I went to when I was trying to learn a little bit more about pottery. So again, I'm going to flip it. The edges are high, and I'm going to roll it, flip it, roll it, flip it, and roll it. So I'm aiming for about 1/4 of an inch in thickness. So about 1/4 of an inch. And then we need to compress the clay a little bit. And this is a pottery term for just sort of pressing the clay down and smoothing it out. Otherwise, sometimes it has a tendency to crack. So instead of going and buying a rib, this is a little metal rib, you can use something like a credit card. So just take a credit card and cut it into the shape. Just cut the corners off, and you've got your own little rib. And you can use that. And I used a credit card for years, or an old gift certificate that's been used up. So I've compressed this on one side, and then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to compress it on the other side. So I'm just gently but firmly pressing down on the clay. Then I'm going to go the other way. And technically you should do cross and cross on one side, and then do kitty corner and kitty corner on the other side. And this way you're just compressing all the clay and all the particles of clay so that you had no air bubbles and it's nice and flat. Then what I'm going to do is cut a circle. So depending on the size of the little dish that you want, you're going to cut a circle in that size. You can use a cookie cutter. You can use a template. or you can, and this is just a piece of paper that I cut, or a little cardboard, or you can just freehand it. So if you're not too particular, you can freehand it. If you want to use a cookie cutter, a really good way of cutting with a cookie cutter is using a piece of plastic and placing the plastic down on your clay, taking your cookie cutter and pressing. And if you're doing a lot of these, then use something to save your hand. So I'm just using this plate just to press. And what this will do is it will stop the cookie cutter from sticking to the clay, because you can peel this back, and then you can take a little wooden skewer as your cutter, and here's your little circle, and when I lift it, you'll see that the edge is nice and curved. The other way to do this is to, I'm just going to use this to draw the circle, so I'm not pressing it down. The other way to do this is to take your wooden skewer and just to cut this out. I'm going to use a pin tool. This is a pottery tool. It's called a pin tool. And it's just a metal point, same as a skewer, just a little finer. So when I'm using this to cut clay, I'm going to put it straight down, holding it at a complete, 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to go all the way around this circle, trying to keep it at that same angle. And I always come off somewhere so that I can pull this clay away, because this is the edge that doesn't matter. So I'm going to pull that away, and I've got my little circle here. And you can see the difference between the two. This one's got a nice smooth edge, and this one has a little bit of a rough edge, and we can deal with both. I can come around and I can just smooth this out with my fingers. And you can even use, this is just an old sponge, I can even use just a little sponge that's got a little bit of water in it to smooth those edges out as well. Now, this is where the magic happens. We are going to put some color on these. So I always have a bucket of water beside me so that I can clean up my hands. And I used just craft paint from the store. So just any acrylic craft paint. Let's use. And I've got a plate and some paint. So just give it a shake. Pour your paint out. And you don't have to add color. If you want to leave it plain, it's this beautiful soft white. So I did paint these with just the beak and the eyes. So really, you could leave those plain white. You don't even need a color if you don't want to go and buy the paints. But these tend to go on sale quite often, the little acrylic paints. And I also used makeup sponges. These were at the dollar store, just cheap makeup sponges. And I used these to apply the paint. If you have stencils, great. I got these stencils at Michael's. I think you'll recognize this one as this pattern. And I think it was this pattern too, yeah. Yep. And you can spend a lot on stencils, or you can spend a little on stencils. It just depends on which stencils you get and how much you want to spend, how big they are, and if they're on sale, of course, because we all know Michael's is famous for putting them on sale. So I'm just going to place this down. I might try and make one of the daisies right in the middle of that clay. And then I'm going to use this roller and just press it in a little bit. You don't want to press it in a lot because you will change the dimension of your little circle. So just enough that the stencil sticks into the clay. Then I'm going to take this little makeup sponge. I'm going to apply some paint, but that's too much. It's just going to squish everywhere. So I'm just going to dab it to get the excess paint off. And then I'm just going to start to go around a couple of daisies. And I might want to apply a little bit more paint. So on air dry clay, I can use these acrylic paints. On the stoneware clay that we use at the Guild, you cannot use these. You have to use underglaze or glaze. Okay, and then we'll grab another sponge and another color. So let's go into this really beautiful blue. And I'm hoping that the colors will blend into one another. I love homemade pieces. I love it when they have little indications that this was not made in a factory. So I really try not to go crazy perfect with my pieces, which isn't hard to do sometimes. Sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes it's hard to make them look really handmade and different. So I might put a little green down here, a little green down here. Might do another blue one. So you can just play with this. This is just fun. And you might want to just let that dry a little bit, but you can really add quite a bit of color and layer it quite thickly. I could even add a little bit of blue to this purple and see what happens. Get sort of a nice blend of colors. Ooh, that's kind of pretty. Quite organic. And just fill in all the areas that I see. Blend in some of the colors so there's no sharp edges. And then this is where the magic happens. So we'll just peel this away. And it is so wonderful. Because you get nice crisp lines. Then I'm going to take this sponge and I'm just going to go around the edges very gently, trying not to go into that painted area because it is wet and you will smudge it. So the edges are nice and smooth now. We've got our color on here. And then you could let this dry for a little bit because it's very soft and tender. But if you wanted to, with the air dry clay, you can drop this into a bowl and that will give it the shape. So that's how these got their shape. So you could drop this into the bowl like so, center it, just tap it down a couple of times, and then let it dry. And what you will get, let's see if we can get this in, the clay will shrink a little bit. When it shrinks, it'll come off the edges of that. And what you will get is this little tiny cute bowl, like so. If you don't have a bowl, you can just simply maneuver your clay. You can bring up the sides, like so. This is what, oops, sorry, my hand. This is what I love about clay, is you can maneuver it. If you don't like it, you can do it again. So I'm just rolling up the sides, trying not to get my hands in the paint and smudging it. I'm just working the clay up slowly. It's better with clay to just maneuver it slowly so that it gets used to where you want it to go. It does have a memory, and it will tend to go back flat again if I try and do this all at once. But if I slowly bring it up and push it down, slowly bring it up and push it down, it will accept its fate. There we go. So that is looking quite similar to one of these bowls. Now this I will let dry for at least 24 hours, if not longer. You'll know it's dry when it's not cool to the touch. Wet clay tends to be quite cold, quite cool. So you want all that moisture to dry. Better to leave it for an extra long time because you don't want to seal that moisture in. That would create mold and it wouldn't be good. So once that dries, and honestly, that's it. You take your Mod Podge, and you give it a couple of coats, read the instructions, 2-3 coats, as many as you want. And then apparently it's dishwasher safe even, which is crazy in my head, but it's just fabulous, the resources that we have out there. So you should sign your name on the bottom because, as we know, pottery lasts forever. We're even finding it from Egyptians and thousands of years ago. So always sign your name. So I have just, hopefully you can see that, I have a little stamp that I use and I stamp my name in here. Some potters do little signatures, little signets, but do some sort of an indication to say, yes, I made this, I created this with my own hands. And then it's fantastic as a gift. It's fantastic to keep on your dresser. You can use this for keys, for rings, and there you have it. One simple little easy project with your clay. And from there, you can make a couple, you can give them away, and then you can do the ornaments. Then you can do little sculptures, little owls, little pigs. These you can just sculpt yourself and have some fun. So I hope you enjoyed this little class. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me and just have fun. It's air dry clay. So play with it. And then if you want to get into the stoneware and into the kiln and into a little bit longer process, talk to Amaranth. They are fantastic for helping people and giving great advice. And have fun. Just enjoy. Anybody can do it. Thanks.